Right, UFC Fight Night, Hermansson versus Pyfer. And for this fight here, Daniel Marcos versus Aoriqileng. I'm going with Daniel Marcos to win via decision. Although getting a KO might be possible. But the reason I'm picking decision is Aoriqileng, he likes to throw a lot of leg kicks, and he did it against Zahabi, but it just didn't end well because Zahabi's a very defensive striker where he has power, but he waits for a guy to overcommit and then blitz them with power. Daniel Marcos can use pressure and leg kicking to put you at a disadvantage. But against a guy like Aoriqileng, I think he's going to throw a lot of leg kicks even though he's a boxer. And Daniel Marcos, having that Muay Thai background, is going to be able to teep and check the kicks, putting Aoriqileng at a disadvantage and using good lateral movement and doing that for 3 rounds to win the fight. None of this Crun Gracie BS where, what's his name? Johnny Munoz was just grabbing hold of him, trying to bring it down to the ground, which it worked in the first round, but Aoriqileng saw what he was trying to do, then mixed up the grappling of his own, taking him down and landing ground and pound and actually doing damage, and did that for like the last 2 rounds. But against Daniel Marcos, he isn't going to look to grapple, and if he tries to, he's got the good takedown defense. We saw him use it against Simon Oliveira, UFC 283, and it worked. So Aoriqileng, I'm sorry, but I don't think he can win that fight. I'm not sorry, but he won't win. Right, Hyder Amil versus Fernie Garcia. This is a weird one because right here, ignore that, please. It's wrong. You go on all the bookmakers, you'll see that it's actually the opposite. It's the other way around. And I think Hyder Amil will win this fight via decision. Fernie Garcia, he's not really a guy who gets knocked out. But what he does do is swing. And he doesn't have that much technique. And every time I watch him fight, it feels like he's being beaten up. But then he tries to counter by swinging and it just doesn't work. Like against Rinya Nakamura, it was just pure wrestling domination. He had nothing. The only thing Fernie Garcia might be able to do, and I say might, is try and look for a submission. Because Hyder Amil can be prone for that, because I've seen a lot of guys try and take him down and they're able to get his back sometimes. Like, what was his name? If I read it there, yeah, Chase Gibson in the first round. You got him in a tight rear naked choke, but he doesn't tap. That's what I'm saying. He's got a possibility to lock up the choke, but he doesn't have the ability to finish it. So I think Amil on the feet will just outstrike Fernie Garcia by just coming forward and pressuring him. And because Fernie Garcia's striking is like very average, I'll say. I'm not going to say bad, because he did get that knockout over Joshua Weems. But he was swinging and the left-hand side of his like chin was so open, and I can see like a guy like Hyder Amil tagging him a few times, but his chin will hold out and he'll end up winning a 30-27 decision. Right, next we have Zach Pauga versus Bogdan Guskov. I'm actually going for Guskov to win via KO, and I think he can do it in the first round. One thing I've noticed with Zach Pauga, I'm a bit suspect of his chin. I know he hasn't been knocked out since the Mohammed Usman fight, but there's some things that he does which worry me. He gets hit a lot now. He's resorted to becoming more of a grappler after that knockout by like clinching and sometimes looking for a takedown. And against Modestas Bukauskas, some of you might have thought he won that fight. I don't think he did. I mean, I don't think Zach Pauga won that fight. And against Bogdan Guskov, I know he lost to Volkan Oezdemir. But remember, that fight should have never happened. How can you come in on your first UFC fight? Yeah, you're 14-2 against Cans, and then you put him up against a veteran guy who's fought all over the block. And of course, he ends up losing the fight. He actually gets submitted, which is rare, because when does Volkan Oezdemir do submissions? Never. But when has Zach Pauga been a guy to really wrestle? Not until recently. So I think Bogdan Guskov is going to walk him down. And I'm not going to lie, I did see a bit of success with the striking with Bogdan Guskov against Volkan Oezdemir when it was in the pocket. And I think if he can like catch Zach Pauga in the chin, it could be like a flash one. He'll get knocked out cold because Zach Pauga's fast, but he don't really hit that hard. So I think as he rushes into the pocket, from what I've seen with Bogdan against Volkan Oezdemir, when he started trading with him a little bit, I think he's going to be able to catch Zach Pauga with a left hook, because that's going to be open when he's throwing that straight punch down the centre. Right, Jeremiah Wells versus Max Griffin. In my opinion, this fight can go 2 ways. And you might laugh at me for this, but I actually think Max Griffin is going to KO Jeremiah Wells, and I think he will do it in the... I'm going to go with round 3. Because the thing about Jeremiah Wells is he's so aggressive and explosive that it can lead to him being like off balance at times. A bit like Malcolm Gordon, but I don't want to compare them to in terms of their skill set, but some of the things they can do, and they can be uncoordinated. Jeremiah Wells has got a lot of power, but he's got this tendency to leave his chin up when he explodes and get countered down the middle and get dropped in fights. Max Griffin is very good at countering on the back foot at times. And it's rare that you see a guy goes out there and just mauls him on the ground. Colby did it and got a TKO on him, but he's never been knocked out or dropped in a fight. Jeremiah Wells has been dropped now a few times. And not only that, I'm not just worried about his chin, I'm worried about his bottling ability. Because how do you bottle a fight in the 3rd round by taking the guy down and getting caught in the anaconda when you have absolutely dominated him on the ground for 2 rounds? And he looked like he was out of his depth. And then he comes out because Jeremiah Wells leaves his head and chin so exposed to the chokes. He ends up getting anaconded. And I don't think Max Griffin has got the jiu-jitsu to do that on him. But I think he's got the takedown defense to make it harder for Jeremiah Wells to get the takedowns working how he likes to do it. And because of that, I think Max Griffin is a better striker, but Jeremiah Wells carries more power. But you see that Max Griffin actually averages like a knockdown every fight. I know MMA math doesn't make sense, but from what I see, a guy who can counter with his right cross against a guy who likes to explode in the pocket. I can see a Matt Semmelsberger situation, but the difference is Max Griffin's got more power than Semmelsberger and will have the ability to actually get a finish and will stop the takedowns. So I think Jeremiah Wells will start off quite well, get him against the cage, struggle to take him down, but in round 3 the bottling ability might come back and I think he'll get tired and he'll get countered and he'll get knocked out cold. Right, Devin Clark versus Marcin Prachnio. This is a bit of a meme fight and you're going to laugh with who I'm picking and it's not even that confident. I'm not confident in either, it could go either way, but I'm going with Prachnio to win via decision because Devin Clark relies too much on athleticism, and to be fair, both of them don't have a good chin. But when we're talking about who is the better striker, and yes, he lost to Sam Alvey, but he also beat Khalil Rountree. Looking at that now, you'd think, how's he done that? And he's also beaten William Knight, which we all saw what happened. It looked rigged. William Knight probably bet on himself. He was like, I'm not making that much money. Let me just go out with a bang, bet on myself, make it obvious and leave the sport. And go into bodybuilding probably. But Devin Clark, anyway, he relies on the athleticism, trying to clinch onto you and look to go for takedowns. But I don't think his takedowns are that good. And a lot of the time, it's a lot of hugging against the cage. It's rare that you see Devin Clark get this guy down to the ground and make use of that position and do ground and pound. He struggles to hold them positions. So you'll see he gets a lot of control time, but the control time is coming from holding them up against the cage. And I think Marcin Prachnio, his footwork isn't too bad, and I think he can get those kicks going and make it hard for Devin Clark to do that because you need to use your legs to drive into the takedown. And I believe Marcin Prachnio, he's good at throwing inside as well as outside kicks, and I think if he can kick to the inside and then use that to set up his punches, he could drop a guy like Devin Clark because he's taken so much damage. His teeth, his bones have taken a beating, whereas Marcin Prachnio, it's more of like a, what's it called? CTE type of level of damage compared to Devin Clark, where it's a lot of physical like pain and damage like in that type of area. But I think Marcin Prachnio, and it's actually painful to say that he'd win this fight because it just, after watching the last fight and getting taken down by Petrosyan and just dominated on the ground, you'd think Devin Clark could do the same, but he could, but he doesn't really do that well when he gets people down. It's a lot of hugging and then fighting against the cage. And I think Marcin Prachnio can fight with his back off the cage and use his kickboxing to win a decision. But you never know, he might get a KO, but I doubt it. As you know, I don't really talk about WMMN here, but I do notice the Loma Lookboonmee, her Muay Thai is very good. And I'm going to have to go with her. I'm sorry, this is probably not what you want to hear, but I'm just going to go with her to win via decision. And yeah, move on to the next fight. Bolaji Oki versus Damir Hasdanovic. From what I'm hearing, the fight might be off. I hope not. But if the fight happens, no way is Damir Hadzovic winning this fight. Absolutely not. Bolaji Oki 100% will win this fight, and I think he's actually going to KO him. And believe it or not, he never really gets KO'd. I don't think he's been KO'd for probably over 5 years, but you've got to remember, look at the activity of this guy. 37, coming back. Against Jacketti, he just got out-grappled, looked helpless on the ground. And against Bolaji, from what I've seen on him, especially on the Contender Series, he looks very good. His body shots, what he'll start to do is he'll land a cross and then come to the body with that body hook. And it's a very effective combination. And he doesn't really like to press people. He lets opponents come towards him. So I can see Damir Hadzovic coming towards him. And he's the guy like, well, then you shouldn't have submitted me then. That guy. Yeah, so he'll press him forward. And Oki, what he's going to do is he's going to wait for him to throw the punch, counter with the cross. And then as he's backing up, come to the body and then unload a furious like combination of punches. That is what he will do. And I can see Damir, because he's taken so much time off, I don't really think he's that good anyway. He won't be able to take these punches. This guy's younger by almost 10 years and he's got a longer reach. He's only an inch taller, it don't really mean much, but he's just better than him. Right, the next fight, again, another KO coming for me. And I'm going with Carlos Prates to win the fight via KO in the first round. This guy's KOs look so good, you just have to look them up for yourself. Because Trevin Giles is very clunky, but I believe there is a chin problem. He's got some good wins on his record, which make you think he's actually quite good. Like, I believe, I might be wrong, he beat Ryan Spann. I need to have a quick look at this quickly. Yeah, he did in a split decision. And he also beat Brendan Allen. That's another one that actually confuses me. But he was only 2 fights into his career. That's what I'm saying. He's a weird type of character in terms of when you look at his wins. Like a Roman Delide win as well. Preston Parsons, that was a controversial one. James Krause, like, he has good wins on his record. But then when you look at the fights here, like the Zach Cummins fight, where he gets dropped and he gets guillotine choked, that is his weakness, getting guillotined. And against Jared Mearshart as well, guillotined. And it's because he shoots for a double leg and he leaves his chin wide open. I even predicted, not to like show off or anything, that Gabriel Bonfim in the first round would choke him with a guillotine choke. You can go back and watch the video if you don't believe me at 291 predictions. But anyways, going back to the thing, Prates, I haven't even said enough about this guy. His kicking game is so good, it's so snappy, it's just head kick galore. And then he'll throw the kick, and he always uses the kicks to set up his punches. And if you're worried about, Giles is quite big, look at the guys who he's beaten. He can use his strength against a guy like Prates to get him down, because Prates looks quite skinny and not that beefy, but his takedown defense is very good. He fought this guy, I can't remember what his name is, I think it might be Raymond, or it's one of the ones here where he was so much bigger than him. He was trying to get a double leg, but he just showed so much good takedown defense by pushing on the head, not allowing him to get both hands locked, and he was able to get him off him and look for the knockout and get it. And on the Contender Series as well against Mitch Ramirez, he just looked sharp, very slick and efficient striking. And especially with the kicks as well is what you need to look out for. Leg kicks as well and head kicks. So if I was going to predict what he's going to do, I think he's going to knock him out with punches on the feet. Not by a head kick, because I think he'll be a bit more patient with them. He might mix up one, but I think he might mix up more of a leg kick where he doesn't want to throw a kick, maybe become off balance and let Trevin Giles get a takedown or something. So yeah, I think Prates will knock him out using boxing. Right, Rodolfo Vieira versus Armen Petrosyan. I believe Petrosyan believed that a guy poisoned him. I don't know if that's true or not, but I've got to go with Rodolfo Vieira. He's one of those guys who creates a weird matchup for Armen Petrosyan, and because he shoots in with so much volume for takedowns, I'm going to predict he will do it in round 2. Round 1, I can see Armen Petrosyan looking sharp, Rodolfo Vieira being a bit more patient. I know I said he likes to shoot for volume, but I think he'll be a bit worried about the striking of Petrosyan, because every time he's come up against a guy with a bit of grappling, he gets taken down, and fighters have some good success about him. For example, Gregory Rodrigues got like a rear naked choke attempt, didn't get the finish, but if you give your back away to someone like Rodolfo Vieira, it is a lock that you'll get finished if you give away your back. And I can see that happening because of how good Rodolfo Vieira's jiu-jitsu background is. It's none of this soy, as you would call Cron Gracie BS, where I'm just going to try and pull you in and look for a submission. No, he goes for like double legs. He uses wrestling to try and get you down. And although his takedowns aren't that great, the volume that he throws them at, makes it a hard fight for him. And a guy who already has not got the best takedown defense, I think he'll struggle. And he's got a good chin as well, probably because of the thick neck. That'll make him more conditioned to take a punch. Although you've got some fighters with a thick neck who, they haven't got an amazing chin. For example, Gilbert Burns, he's not got the greatest chin, and he's got an extremely wide neck. But Rodolfo Vieira is one of those wide neck guys who, he looks masculine, and he's got a very good chin on him. And I believe he can get Armen Petrosyan down by weathering the storm, like he did against Cody Rundage when he got knocked down, and then messing about with him on the ground, looking to pass his guard and get a submission. And I don't even think he's a guy who has to use the cage. He's one of those guys who, he'll pull you down in the middle. He'll try and take you down wherever it is. He doesn't care. So, yeah. Right, Michael Johnson versus Darrius Flowers. In a weird way, Flowers could win the fight, but I'm just going with Michael Johnson. And I know he's getting older now. He got knocked out against a jiu-jitsu guy, like when Kevin Lee quoted that. No, who was it? It was like Michael Chiesa said, you got knocked out. Yeah, it was him who said it. And Darrius Flowers, the one thing I worry about him is, that you might not have heard about, is he did do boxing back in the day. And look at this madness. He was 1-10 as a boxer, which made me believe, was he a journeyman? I'm starting to believe maybe he was a journeyman. And if he was a journeyman and he was getting TKO'd all the time, I can't really say how good his chin is, because with boxing, you kind of want the upcoming fighter to get the TKO, but you don't want to take too much damage so that you can get back in there again. But that being said, don't you want to get dominated to a UD so you can fight more often? I don't really know the rules completely, but if you see here, when he gets TKO'd, he's allowed to fight a few months later in the same year, so maybe the rules aren't actually like that. But it's kind of hard to say how bad his chin is, because in the UFC or in MMA it hasn't looked that bad. But I'm going to have to go with Johnson, and I think I'm going to go with a decision. But there is a potential that he could get a KO, because Darrius Flowers... No, you know what? I'm going to go with a KO, and I'm going to say he'll do it in round 2. Because Darrius Flowers is like a showman type of fighter where he leaves his hands down, he kind of like taunts in a way. And if you do that against Johnson, a guy with very good takedown defense, he'll stop your takedowns. Flowers was getting tired against Jake Matthews, and Michael Johnson on his best day has better boxing than Jake Matthews, as good as it is. And very good takedown defense, better than Jake Matthews as well, on his day. And I think after that knockout, he needs to bounce back. And I think this fight here is a fight that he could win, but it's also a fight that he might struggle in. And he could potentially get knocked out again, because Flowers is a big guy. He's not your normal lightweight. I believe he fought at middleweight or welterweight, and he's quite big and beefy. And against Michael Johnson, he's not the biggest guy, but he carries speed with him, and he can also knock you out. So I think this will be the fight where he can knock out Darrius Flowers, because of the way how he fights with his hands down. And Michael Johnson connects on your chin with your hands down. I'm sorry, you're probably going out cold. But anyways, yeah, that's what I'm going with. But I wouldn't be surprised if Flowers wins. Right, Gregory Rodrigues against Brad Tavares. I am going with Gregory Rodrigues to get a KO, and I think he can do it in the first round. I know a lot of you are going to say Brad Tavares has got a good chin. Brad Tavares has a good chin. But in my opinion, it was good, but it's starting to fade now. He's getting hit more and more now. For example, look at the Bruno Silva fight. I know it was an early stoppage, but he threw that punch straight down the centre. And that punch he did there is one that Gregory Rodrigues does a lot. He did it against, what was his name? I've forgotten his name. Oh my God, I've forgotten. Julian Marquez. And it landed and he put him down. That shot will land on Brad Tavares. And that win against Chris Weidman, it's not impressive. The leg kicks looked good, but you're not going to do that to Gregory Rodrigues, who's going to be pressuring you in your face, not giving you a chance to throw them type of kicks. Also, he's got very good takedown defense, but one thing Rodrigues will do is he won't just look to take you down. He'll look to take you back if you're against the cage as well. So he might not even need to look for takedowns. He'll look for back control whilst fighting you down the centre. And I think because of his age now, he's getting older now, he wasn't getting wobbled against Chris Weidman, but he looked a bit uncomfortable with the striking at times in the middle, even though his leg was chewed up. And I think against Gregory Rodrigues will definitely have a good chance of knocking him out because of that. I know he got knocked out against Bruna Ferreira, and I also called that. I'll put a link up there if you really want to see. But anyways, yeah. I just think that Gregory Rodrigues is better than him. Brad Tavares don't hit hard enough, and I believe he can get a KO in the first round against Brad Tavares. Right, the next fight with Iho Pretoria versus Robert Bryczek. I'm going with Bryczek to win the fight because, and you know what, I'm predicting first round because with Iho Pretoria, his striking is really not that great, and Bryczek, he looks like a proper boxer. When you watch him box, you see all the good fundamentals with his head movement. His footwork's good. The only thing I'll say, I know it's going to sound like a, what's the word? Contradiction. But the only problem with him is when he goes backwards, he kind of jumps backwards instead of using his feet to shuffle backwards. And jumping like that can leave your chin come up high in the air compared to if you just shuffle your feet back, keep your hands high with your guard, compared to just jumping back and leaving your chin exposed. That's the only thing I'd worry about. But because he presses his opponent, and whilst he presses them, he keeps a compact guard and fires off with a patient approach, I think he's going to struggle, Iho Pretoria, because Iho Pretoria is a bit wild, uncoordinated when he's striking. He's good friends with Strickland, and that's probably why his chin ain't that great, to be fair. And against Maurizio Rua, I've said it multiple times, he caught him with a good shot. Didn't wobble him, but it hit him and he could feel it. And against Rodolfo Bellotto, he bottled that fight. He had him hurt, but just couldn't get the job done because Bellotto was holding onto the legs. He wasn't really defending well. And if he really wanted to, if Pretoria was smart, he'd look to try and take down Robert Bryczek, because when you're a boxer and you hold your hands so high, the body will be exposed. But it looks like most of the time Pretoria, he looks to strike even though he should be really using his grappling considering his chin ain't great. But I do think Robert Bryczek, first round, is going to walk right through him and knock him out. And this is a weird type of co-main event, but it's a good one. And I'm going with Dan Ige to win via decision. He's one of those good gatekeepers who can beat people like Andre Fili. But when he comes up against a guy like Qatar, even Bryce Mitchell, he won that fight 100%. Stand by that. I made a video on that. Mozart Evloev as well. Like, he was worried about the takedown a lot, even though he's got good takedown defense. But because Mozart Evloev is so strong with takedowns, you have to worry about it. He ends up losing that fight. And then Josh Emmett as well, a powerful hitter who, not underrated, he gets the credit he gets, but is a hard opponent. He just struggles against the guys in like the 1 to 6 range. And Andre Fili's just outside of the rankings where he's just too inconsistent. He beats people where you're like, maybe he's got the potential to be ranked, but he just can't because of like that one loss. Like, he's inconsistent. He beats a guy like Bill Aljo to a split decision, which you might not think he would won. Nathaniel Wood, he gets dropped early. No, he drops Nathaniel Wood early with a straight punch, jumps on top of him, but then he gets dropped against Nathaniel Wood. And then he hurts Nathaniel Wood again, but just can't finish the job. Like, he's more accurate with his punches compared to Dan Ige, who's got more power, and I think his striking carries more damage than a guy like Fili, who he can knock you out, but it's more of like a blitzing combination of punches, which is what makes him look good. He's more of a slick striker who has got power, like we saw against Lucas Almeida. But I do think Dan Ige's just the experience, even though Andre Fili's experience, he's more experienced against lower ranked fighters compared to Dan Ige, who's more experienced against the top guys in the division, and he's got a very powerful overhand on him. He could mix up the grappling against Fili if he wanted to, and Fili isn't going to weight bully him like he could do against a guy like, what was his name? I keep forgetting, Nathaniel Wood. So I am going with Dan Ige decision. Right, main event, Jack Hermansson versus Joe Pyfer. I am very tempted to go with Jack Hermansson, I'm not going to lie to you. But I'm going to go with Joseph Pyfer to win the fight in the... I'm trying to think of what would be a good round, and I know it would be a KO or TKO, because Jack Hermansson puts on a very high pace in the first round. You know what? I'm going to go with first round finish, and the reason why I think it will be in the first round, I know Joseph Pyfer sometimes can take a while to go, because he's a guy who, he doesn't just brawl with you, he's very patient, like a sniper approach. Let me measure the distance, come to the body. And I know Jack Hermansson's got very good cardio, but I believe Joe Pyfer can slow him down by hitting him to the body. If he can just measure the distance like he does, then come to the body, well then there's going to be problems for Hermansson, because he's doing a lot of movement and he has got good cardio like I've mentioned. But if you mention a guy who's going to mix up body punches as well, he can slow down. Look at the Strickland fight. If you can mix up a punch or a kick to the body, the teeps, he'll get tired. And I don't think Joseph Pyfer's going to go out there trying to grapple with him. I think that's what Jack Hermansson might try. But we have seen times when Jack Hermansson comes up against a powerful striker where, for example, Chris Curtis, he doesn't want to engage in the pocket. He wants to have a high output, but like fight on the outside. And that's when Chris Curtis and him started swearing and shouting after the fight. And he was shouting because Chris Curtis lost the fight because Jack Hermansson was running away. He was being smart, fighting on the outside. It won't work against Pyfer because Pyfer's good at cutting off the cage. And I believe in the first round, it depends on how Jack Hermansson comes out. If he's coming out with a fast pace, I think he'll get finished in the first round. If Jack Hermansson does what he did against Chris Curtis, I can see it being in like round 3. And I'm not too worried about Joe Pyfer's cardio because he doesn't exert a lot of energy when he's fighting. He doesn't force things. He takes his time and finds like a submission like he did in Abdulrazak Alhassan. He lands a punch when he knows he's going to connect on the chin. And I'm surprised he didn't knock out Abdulrazak Alhassan when he landed that right cross. Dustin Stoltzfus got extremely lucky that his arm just snapped. That won't happen again. Jack Hermansson won't do that to him. And also, another thing. Look at the wins he's had. Oh, it doesn't show it on here, but he's beaten Gerald Meerschaert at grappling. And look at how good Meerschaert is when he comes to grapple. Eric Anders. He's beaten guys who maybe aren't as good as Jack Hermansson in wrestling, but they're very good at it. Not very good, but good. And Jack Hermansson's very good at it as well. But I think because of the striking disparity, I know Hermansson's good at moving his head, but if Joe Pyfer was so reckless and aggressive, then Hermansson would have a better chance. But he's not that type of fighter. Patient, he will find the target and he'll take his time. And I can actually see him beating him to a decision as well. It probably won't be. It will be by KO, TKO, submission. But I wouldn't be surprised if he did and took his time. But anyways, yeah, this guy is something special. The power he has is something else. And Jack Hermansson's not really a hard hitter. He's just good at ground and pound when he gets you down. And he has got a relatively alright chin. Like, you never see him knocked out. Yeah, he might get finished by TKO ground and pound, but that was against Roman Dolidze where he can't move. And the one against Jared Cannonier, that was a proper finish. But the one against Roman Dolidze, that wasn't due to a chin. That was due to, I can't move. Get me out of here, please. And Joe Pyfer, enough said about him. Inactivity as well from Jack Hermansson. 1 year and 1 month ago it is now. Joe Pyfer being very active and looking good in each fight and improving so. And participating in those competitions like I've mentioned. So thank you for watching. Talk to you soon.